Shooting fans, stay tuned for America's least known national park, but perhaps our most important one. It's the Springfield Armory and the guns of our freedom. Plus, Sam Colt's monster revolver, the powerful Walker in great guns. And Byron Ferguson is here drawing some long leads on a running target. It's all today here on American Shooter.
American Shooter is brought to you by Colt and the new Colt XS series. If it isn't a Colt, it's just a copy. And by Spear Bullets, rifle and pistol ammunitions.
Welcome to this edition of American Shooter. I'm Jim Scouton, and this is my M1 Garand, the greatest battle implement ever devised, as General Patton described it. It was perhaps the most significant product of the Springfield Armory in a long history of making the guns for this nation. Today, the Armory is America's least known national park. The address is Armory Square on Federal Street, and today the massive iron fence from the 1800s primarily guards a community college. Classrooms now occupy most of the buildings where the instruments of our freedom were designed and built, beginning in 1794, when George Washington decided a new nation needed to make guns. The Arsenal building is preserved as an historic site.
Actually, in the first year or so of the manufacture of arms, they really repaired more muskets than they manufactured. This one here was the 1795 model, which was the first gun manufactured at the Armory itself.
It was a copy of the French Charleville that our forefathers had used to outgun the British. It would be made in variations until 1840, when percussion would take over. But in the period, mass production was invented here, interchangeable parts, and the Blanchard lathe that followed a pattern to turn a rifle stock from hardwood.
It meant that an unskilled laborer, basically 12-year-old boys, had the capability then of producing 12 of these stocks a day. At that time, a skilled person, a craftsman, would make one every day or two.
By the 1800s, 60% of the male population of Springfield worked in the arms industry. And Gun Valley, from Springfield to Hartford, Connecticut, became the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution.
Bicycles started here, typewriters started here, sewing machines started here, and it was because the skilled labor that was available in the firearms industry.
The Armory was making the rifled muzzle loaders that would shortly be needed in the Civil War. The model of 1855 was introduced with the Maynard primer system, a roll of caps that advanced when the hammer was cocked. But paper caps were not reliable in the field.
And soon the Maynard cap primer disappears because they found it was more nuisance to keep it operating than it was to have the soldier put the individual cap right onto the nipple.
It was the model 1861 that armed the federal troops and then returned to be stored in the racks Longfellow immortalized as the organ of muskets. And the public was invited to visit to see the strength of the nation.
These racks of arms, which held just under 1,200 arms, literally were side to side, end to end, and almost 50,000 square feet in the 3 floors.
This remaining rack with 600 unissued muskets is now conservatively valued at $5 million. But the self-contained cartridge had arrived, and the Armory needed a new idea.
They turned to their master armor, Ethan Allen, who changed the rifled muskets and added a breech block to them that could be opened when you cocked the hammer and you lifted the breech block, making the rear of the barrel available to put a single-shot cartridge in.
The Allen conversion was chambered for a 58 caliber rimfire cartridge. Then the barrels were sleeved down to 50 caliber. Later, the trapdoor became a production gun and was chambered in 45-70. Then came the search for repeating firepower and the experiments with the Hotchkiss and the Chaffee Reese that fed through magazines in the stock. But the choice was the Craig Jorgensen with the side-opening magazine. that was outgunned in the Spanish-American War by the German-built Mauser. That was the discovery that would result in the '03 Springfield in time to fight the Germans in the trenches. But John Garand was now designing here.
Garand actually patented his first gun in 1919. And it's an evolution of various guns, as you look down through here, that led to the building of what every GI who fought in World War II knew as the M1 Garand.
This is serial number 1, a hand-built prototype assembled by John Garand. Then there are the commemoratives, the first mass-produced Garand, then number 100,000, then 2 million, 3 million, and the last, serial 6,084,405. Next would come the M14. This is one of 2 presentation models made for President Dwight David Eisenhower with serial DDE-1. And there are the handguns of history from Smith and Colt and more, like serial number 5 of what would be called the 1911, the one brought in by John Browning that fired 6,000 rounds without a failure as the Army tested the new design. The treasures of the Springfield Armory are beyond calculation, preserved under the flag in what is perhaps our most forgotten national park. But this is the one that through 2 centuries has guarded the freedoms we enjoy today. If you happen to be traveling near Springfield, Massachusetts, we strongly recommend you visit the Armory and see the guns. But you can't see all of them. Coming up, the rest of the collection. And get a pen ready, because we can help solve that problem. After the Armory closed in the 1960s, it was turned over to the National Park Service, even though the mission is to collect and preserve historic firearms. The result has been a problem in funding that keeps much of the collection out of sight. What you can see if you visit is about 10% of the Armory's historic collection, the guns in secure displays on the main floor. It's what you can't see that will astound you. On the second floor, thousands of long guns stand lonesome vigil in the racks that were built for this nation's centennial celebration, the 1876 exhibition in Philadelphia, when the public could be trusted to look and not steal. And on modern racks, the complete collection of the long guns of war from armies both friend and foe. And the edged weapon collection, sabers from the age of cavalry, many produced by the Armory. And there are handguns. Pull a drawer and find the history of Smith & Wesson, or try another and Colt revolvers come into view, or the evolution of Browning's semi-auto Colt pistols. It is the Armory's mission to collect these arms, along with the hundreds of thousands of documents that trace their history, preserved in file boxes. If you are a writer or researcher working on a project, you have free access to the collection, but the public can't see this. And neither can you visit the full auto vaults that hold the very first production BAR presented with brass plaques in 1918. And here's the one you've never seen, the WAR, the Winchester automatic rifle, the design that was not adopted. Also here, the first Browning 50 cal, water-cooled. Then there's the first 50 cal ever mounted on an aircraft, and beside it, the first adapted to anti-aircraft work. And the first Colt Armalite AR-15 without the forward assist that was added by the Armory engineers to solve the feeding problem. And there's the first M60 developed at the Armory. And the larger guns of war, the 20mm cannon of modern dogfights designed by the Armory engineers with General Electric. It is Steve Beatty's dream that much more of this might be made available to visitors. He's had a plan for years to enclose the arms in the centennial racks in glass cases so the public could stroll these aisles and see these historic guns firsthand. But there is no budget for that from our government that cares very little about historic arms compared to trees and grizzly bears.
In many ways, I have to compete equally with a Yellowstone. I have to compare my 20,000 visitations sometimes with millions, literally millions. And that makes it sometimes difficult to get funding.
Coming up, it's the Magnum handgun of the Civil War, and then getting a deal on your own Garand in Gun Tech. Colt Python 357 Magnum. For a time in the 20th century, this was the most powerful handgun. But in the 19th century, that distinction went to a different Colt, the Walker.
Great guns. Brought to you by Ruger, arms makers for responsible sportsmen.
By 1842, Sam Colt's Patent Arms Company in New Jersey had folded, but the Patterson model revolvers he produced there had made an impression on certain military officers. Ever persistent, the 33-year-old Colt scraped enough money together in 1847 to build an improved model based on suggestions from Captain Samuel Walker of the Texas Rangers. With the help of Captain Walker, the U.S. Ordnance Department placed an order for 1,000 of Colt's new revolvers within a week of their first exposure to the gun. Colt named the new revolver the Walker in honor of the captain, but had no factory to produce the order. So he turned to manufacturer Eli Whitney Jr., the son of the cotton gin inventor, for a run of 1,100 Walkers that was completed by the end of the year. The instant success of the gun put Sam Colt back in business and funded his new plant in Hartford, Connecticut. All this makes the value of the Walker to Colt's Firearms Company almost priceless, and today's collectors also prize it as one of the most valuable guns.
The Colt Walker has pretty much captured the imagination early on of the Colt collecting fraternity, the American firearms collecting fraternity. Estimates range from a 3 to 5% survival rate on about 1,000 guns. So you're talking 50 or so weapons, usually in fairly poor condition.
150 years ago, the Walker won over U.S. Army officers who were still leery of repeating firearms. But Colt's new gun was unmatched in its firepower, reliability, and ease of field stripping. The Walker takes down quickly to display the bulk of its barrel, cylinder, and frame. Each piece was machined from an individual billet of steel, and that strength was necessary. The 44 caliber revolver fired 50 grains of black powder behind a 218 grain ball, producing knockdown power close to a modern 357 Magnum. That kind of potency helped horse soldiers overlook its weight, half that of an M1 Garand at nearly 5 pounds. To this day, the Walker is the largest handgun Colt's has produced. But for all the Walker's success, Army and civilian demand for revolvers in the period of the Civil War required faster production methods. Rather than trying to produce more of the labor-intensive Walkers, Sam Colt evolved the design into his smaller and lighter Dragoon models. But for one brief moment in time, the giant hand cannon known as Colt's Walker not only saved the company that continues today, but was the first designed to forecast the era of the modern Magnum handgun.
American Shooter presents Gun Tech, the latest in guns and shooting gear.
Our show on the Springfield Armory seems the place to tell you how to get a deal on an M1 Garand. This is the one I told you is mine. I just got it through the CMP, the Civilian Marksmanship Program. The price for a Garand is $400, and that's quite a deal in a market where Garands are trading at $700 to $800. The Civilian Marksmanship Program is authorized by Congress to sell surplus Garands to individuals who are members of an affiliated shooting club. Now, there are hundreds of clubs. If you qualify, the CMP does the Good Citizen check and ships direct to you. So get a deal on the greatest battle implement ever devised. Get the info at the CMP website. Write this down, odcmp.com, odcmp.com. And how about a World War II fighting knife to go with your Garand? K-Bar is still making the Marine issue knife first adopted in 1941, still with the leather handle and carbon steel blade, still with a leather sheath. The K-Bar fighting knife is $55 at both knife and gun stores. Now, how about something more modern? The latest from Heckler & Koch, the USP Compact, semi-auto, polymer frame, alloy slide, either in satin finish or in black if you'd like to be less flashy. Take your choice of calibers from 9mm all the way up to 45 ACP,
or the relatively new .357 SIG round. With 10 in the magazine and 1 up, this is a lot of firepower for a carry gun. And the price? About what you'd expect, $725 suggested retail. Oh, and keep it running right with X1R Gun Lube, cleaner and gun grease. This stuff was originally developed for the space program. Now it's available for firearms. The shooter's pack is $5 at most gun stores. And that's Gun Tech. And next, Byron's working on his target leads in the Shot of the Week.
American Shooter is brought to you by Smith & Wesson, the world's largest manufacturer of handguns for sporting, law enforcement, and military use since 1852. And by Federal Ammunition, Federal knockdown power.
You know, a lot of Byron Ferguson's exhibition shots are highly useful in bow hunting, and that is the case today, where the question is leading running game. And thanks to the folks at Target Movers, Byron's got running game.
Hey guys, good to see you. People down at Target Movers, soon as this unit we're going to play with this year, we're going to put it through the paces. We're going to do things that this thing was never designed to do. So y'all just take a seat and have fun, because that's what I'm going to do. When you're shooting normally, you'd be pointing the arrow at an appropriate spot in order to hit the target. When sitting down, I'm basically pointing my foot rather than the arrow. I'm just going to point my foot where I expect the target to be. It's instinctive, all right? There's no way to aim it. You just have to feel it. That was fun, but not as fun as what we're going to do next. What affects the lead is the speed of the target and the distance to the target. Obviously, the farther the target is from you, the more you'll have to lead it. Average distance, say 20 yards, at a target moving the speed at which we were shooting, I would be leading probably about 3 to 4 feet. For the long range, I was leading about 15 to 20 feet. All right, let me see, what else can we do? I'll think of something. The problem with doing the ramp shots is the way you shoot a bow and arrow, you focus on the target. And you keep your eye glued to the target. When shooting the ramp shot at a moving target, you're having to focus on the ramp and see the target out of peripheral vision. So it's backwards to what I would normally shoot. All right, we got one more. The problem with a double arrow shot, the bottom arrow receives more energy from the bow limbs than the top arrow. Therefore, it's traveling faster than the top arrow. The count of the bow becomes more critical because of the top arrow being farther off center. If you count the bow a little bit more, it would have the same effect as giving it more lead. I love it. See you later.
Well, all right, so they're not all hunting shots. Okay. Now, here's what's coming for next week. It's the Smith & Wesson Winter Nationals in IDPA competition, the sport that's founded on handgun training. Plus, the heavy muzzleloader shot off a block of wood to feed the family. It's chunk guns in great guns. And Bob Munden is smoking cigarettes with his smoking 6 guns. For American Shooter, I'm Jim Scouten. I'll see you then. In the meantime, shoot safely and keep them in the 10 ring.